Hello, my name is Brandon Krager, and I am a student of John Dorschner's Political 464 class on international relations at the University of Arizona. I'll be presenting on the relationship between neighboring countries, India and Pakistan, specifically on their nuclear history as well as their current situation today. India's increasing conventional capabilities, as well as aggressively thriving militaristic plans, mean that Pakistan's emphasis on the utility of tactical nuclear weapons continues to be on the rise. Pakistan has remained persistent in their desire to maintain the function of nuclear development, and in order to foster this nuclear arms reduction and curb nuclear proliferation, means such as trade must be more concretely established between the countries of India and Pakistan. The road to trade partnership, in which India and Pakistan can both trade equally and benefit equally, however, is a complicated situation due to the fact that India's nuclear program tends to view bombs as more of a potential political instrument, while Pakistan seems to focus more on the fact that these nuclear weapons could potentially increase their militaristic power, and they focus on the bombing as being mainly a militaristic level of gains. In order to prove that they were a relevant nuclear power for the first time since 1974, the Indian government decided to carry out a series of nuclear tests back in May of 1998, and it was mostly done to gain status because the experiments caught the international community's attention and watchdogs unaware, and there was a significant amount of widespread outrage for the move that they had maneuvered, and India had its arch foe Pakistan watching ever so closely to whatever they did. And India made a statement that day with the nuclear program being a force to reckon with. So much so that the United States President Bill Clinton at the time immediately threatened significant financial sanctions, up to $500 million dollars of pending U.S. sanctions on loans or impending loans were guaranteed to India. And although most of these sanctions were eventually dropped, the evidence is clear that Pakistan, as well as the United States, were clearly intimidated by India's daring nuclear maneuver that day. India's nuclear proliferation performance back in 1998 can be argued as a statement that sparked and motivated the tremendous growth of Pakistan's own nuclear programs and weaponry division, because Pakistan most likely felt the pressure to compete with India's intimidating tactical nuclear capabilities, and furthermore felt obligated to emphasize its own nuclear growth. This leads to the argument that Pakistan's nuclear program is mainly run by military officers who think of the bomb in militaristic terms strictly, and who are methodically filling in the perceived shortfalls in nuclear equality and capabilities as a means to shore up the deterrence against a stronger neighbor. Because now, instead of just having one threat, mainly China, to India. India now has two, with Pakistan trying to build up all of the regime they have and the nuclear tactics they have in order to just simply compete with them. And with Pakistan being a significantly smaller geographic force than India, one can suggest that the declaration of India's powerful nuclear presence is what legitimized Pakistan's own nuclear program. Although it is certain that India takes into account the strong military presence that comes with their nuclear dynamism, their weaponry powers act as more of a political force than anything, because in Pakistan, the situation is starkly different. The economic growth in Pakistan is severely stubbed, foreign reserves are dwindling, and the country is plagued by bloodletting. Decisions about nuclear requirements are made by a few generals who view these weapons as a military necessity as well as a political instrument, which is not the case in India. In Pakistan, political leaders take their guidance from generals, and in India, the request of military officials oftentimes falls on deaf ears because it's just such a big country and their political system is so much stronger than that of the smaller Pakistan. And this illustrates that Pakistan simply cannot compare to the competition and have to ramp up their own military dependency on nuclear bombs because to Pakistan, the nuclear bombs and the idea of nuclear power is just saturated with the wonderful connotations of being able to stand independently and on their own as a country that is strong and unnecessarily needing any other country, especially a big brother or sister like India, perhaps, guidance or help when it comes to defending their own land. India tends to take a calmer approach, however, when it comes to nuclear defense than that of Pakistan, simply because of the fact that it is 8 times more economically sound of a country than that of Pakistan, as well as the fact that Pakistan's economy continues to steadily decline and its domestic cohesiveness is simply in the same boat. Even so, Pakistan can still be regarded as a dangerous threat because nuclear weapons are said to be a sign of strength among domestic weakness. And although India is persistent with their advancement in nuclear weaponry, they seem to gravitate towards the stance of their befitting icon of peace, Mahatma Gandhi, in terms of hesitancy to resort to violence. And an example of this is they are the only country that has waited 24 years in between testing their nuclear weaponry. And this truly is a sign of peaceful measure when in comparison to that of Pakistan's methods, because Pakistan's militaristic nuclear agenda continues to escalate. Pakistan intends to be recognized on a world stage for the threat that they can perceive to every other country that's bigger than them or more intimidating than them. And they've developed this nuclear weaponry that is specifically developed for short range targets and tactics overall. It's important to acknowledge that the nuclear power that is being developed in Pakistan right now, specifically these short range tactics, is a significant threat to countries because the advancements of Pakistan's nuclear field include weaponry that is specifically intended for these short proximities, such as against their neighboring countries like India. And the purpose of this is to demonstrate that although they might be weaker opponents overall, they still are more than capable of defending their own soil and their own ground. And they impose a significant and even a dubious nuclear presence because of their intended short range purpose, and Pakistan's military appears intent to deny India the victory in warfare and to destroy it as a functioning society in the event of a complete breakdown in deterrence. And Pakistan is entirely capable of demolishing just about whatever they desire from a short reach perspective, and they can easily gain access to the border with these weapons because it should serve as a substantial warning to India of the impeding militaristic threat that Pakistan is overwhelmingly establishing with the pumping out of these short range militaristic nuclear weapons. The process of maintaining stability in the thick competition between India and Pakistan is an incredible task. And one of the reasons for this, besides for the militaristic and nuclear conflicts already present between the two countries, is the influence of outside influencers such as China, who weighs heavily in on Indian calculations, and because of civil military relations in Pakistan are so imbalanced. China famously participated in arming Pakistan significantly with nuclear weaponry in an attempt to balance out India's powerful nuclear proficiency. And due to this Chinese involvement, Pakistan and India's competitive nuclear arms is becoming more serious than ever. The pace of development in this tactical nuclear weapon delivery systems in India as well as Pakistan has increased dramatically in the past 3 or 4 years, and it's coming down to the fact that there are limited solutions to fix this involvement of China meddling in between the relationship and maybe even magnifying the level of potential harm within the relationship of India and Pakistan, and that is trade. Trade is maybe one of the only potential lights at the end of the tunnel for a positive relationship and a meaningful relationship that's non-violent and not focused so much around nuclear proficiency and nuclear power. And it is something that seriously should be considered in the future years between Pakistan and India. In my opinion, the only practical solution in transforming the current negative relationship between these two neighboring countries of India and Pakistan is trade. Trade is the most peaceful solution that they could possibly endeavor on, because India and Pakistan could easily establish a trade relationship that could usher in a new era of cooperation between these two longtime nuclear rivals. And this would be a major game changer in the dynamics of the relationship between these two neighbors, which would create a stable and definitely less destructive outcome if a future conflict is to arise. Trade would foster and produce a relationship that could contribute to both of the countries' financial platforms, because unfortunately the bilateral trade between India and Pakistan has been somewhere between 2.5 to 3 billion in the last couple of years. 2010 to 2011 was only around $2.6 billion, which is a terrible sum for these two countries that could potentially be one of the world's largest trading blocs. And with all the focus being highlighted on nuclear weapon gains and development, India and Pakistan have seemed to lose interest in the potential to add additional billions of dollars to stream into their economies and improve the businesses and lifestyles of their citizens as a whole. Pakistan is so centered on becoming a major militaristic influence that it has completely lost sight in the economic gains involved with such proactive trade, and it shares a border with a considerable economic powerhouse that it could gain so much for if it only established a more positive economic relationship. Fortunately, it looks like some things are turning around trade wise between India and Pakistan. Luckily, the two countries have seemed to be showing some sparks of interest recently in a more effective trade relationship and are dipping their toes into the water, per se, of a more positive overall trading experience between the two countries. Because just recently, India was granted by Pakistan a most favored trading status, even though India had already granted this status to Pakistan about 15 years previous. It took them a while to get back to them, but it looks like Pakistan has finally come around and acknowledged that, and has also given India the most favored trading status as well. Pakistan has also put in some effort into being taken seriously militaristically. Obviously, that's something we know. They put in a lot of their money and resources into the military, but their economy has somewhat failed to thrive, especially when you consider that India's is about 8 times more economically sound. But as trade relations continue to grow between India and Pakistan, some signs of deepening have been shown. Another remarkable progression has come about as the three agreements between the countries and their trading. The first was that a agreement including customs cooperation and setting up a mechanism to address grievances was put into order. As well, Pakistan additionally announced that it would transition to a negative list base approach, which is intended to allow most commodities to be freely traded, aside from prohibiting a small list of items, which is again a good start. Also, visa rules are in the works of being eased in regards to business traveling between the two countries, as well as banks working more freely and openly together to being able to operate between the two countries more positively. So, although there is a long, long journey down the road of trade and benefiting that road of trade for the two countries, India and Pakistan, it does look like they're showing some small steps down that road. In conclusion, I strongly believe that Pakistan's emphasis on the utility of tactical nuclear weapons will only continue to be the end of the country's relationship as a whole, and that if they really want to get serious about improving both of their economic states as well as overall quality of life for their citizens, that the best way to do so is through further embodying the concepts of trade that they have somewhat started to understand between the two, and that it really isn't a competition of nuclear warfare more so than it is to learn how to get along with your neighbors, because at the end of the day they are neighboring countries and they have to be able to interact with each other in a way that benefits the rest of the world, and all the nuclear threats is only going to bite them in the back at the end of the day. So it's important to realize that it could easily be detrimental if these countries do not turn their way of thinking around and acknowledge the fact that they are, at the end of the day, neighbors, and most importantly should be worried about the economics of their country and not the militaristic gains and losses that come with all of the money sunk into nuclear warfare, and especially the short range tactics that Pakistan is starting to influence other countries to get on that bandwagon right now. So it's important for this world that they really do learn to work together as a pair and utilize the billions of dollars up for grab if they just work together and traded together for the benefit of the rest of the planet. So, in conclusion, I'd like to say that I think trade would be the best option instead of nuclear warfare. Thank you for your time.